And we're live with the VUCA Fit Show. I'm your host, Kevin Oldham, and I am here by myself today. So you get to listen to me talk about something that, frankly, Jose and I discuss quite a bit, particularly as it relates to how I go through the world when he used to be my mentor and my coach. And we're going to talk about a concept. It's actually a psychology concept called the window of tolerance. You've maybe heard us talk about it on the show before. It's a psychology term. There's a gentleman by the name of Dan Siegel who came up with it. And it's a really, really interesting concept that we've talked about on here, but I'm going to just rip on it a little bit myself because I have noticed myself kind of narrowing my window of tolerance. And what that means is when the highs are high and the lows are low, I don't let the highs get too high and I don't let the lows get too low. And so I want to talk about that because you guys have heard me say, I used to find myself in the ditch sometimes. Like it meant that I was maybe not feeling good mentally, maybe depressed or, had anxiety or something. And that window of tolerance on the low side would kind of take me down and maybe tank my day or whatever. And rightfully so on the flip side, I would also have this window of tolerance where maybe I get too excited about something. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some general techniques that you can use to narrow your window of tolerance and why that stuff is important. So like some of the benefits of having a window of tolerance that is, tighter is that you are able to have a more balanced and kind of calm state of mind. Okay. So you're not in the flight or fight mode. You're in a little bit more calm mindset, which is important. If we're excited or we're lethargic, it's really hard to be our best when either of those things are true. You also feel like like me personally, I feel like I'm more in control of not necessarily what's happening in the world, but how I respond to it. And there's strength in that. Like it is an empowering thing to realize that maybe the world is, it's a VUCA world that we live in. It's chaotic, right? Let's use the United States right now. I'm recording this September 12th. So we're a couple weeks out or a couple months out from elections, and it could be, we had some debates earlier this week, and it could cause you to have a lot of anxiety or whatever when you think about the future. And the reality is, I can't control that, but I can control how I respond to the information and the circumstances the information that's coming at me and the circumstances that I face. Like that's my choice, but it's also something that you get to train for. This, you guys hear Jose talk about not wasting unnecessary energy. This is core to one of these concepts, which is that we're able to focus in our most effective way. We're able to be efficient, I guess I would say, right? And furthermore, we're able to, tackle the things that life offers us. So when we're looking at things from a window of tolerance perspective, I want to see if I can pull open I'm going to open a graphic here. So for those of you that do watch us online, first and foremost, appreciate it. And secondly, you're going to get a little treat here. And I'm going to share a little visual representation that can kind of help you get your arms around this concept. And there's a couple of different concepts that I'm going to introduce to you. So the first one is hyperarousal. That's the high highs. Okay. So you get super, super excited. You've got maybe too much energy. It's just like, you're just off the charts, maybe too much for the people around you. I can identify that sometimes. I've had to train to kind of, my wife will even say this, like just kind of tone down a little, or Kevin or Jose will say, hey, you need to Kevin a little less, right? The hypo arousal is the floor. It's the freeze. It's the lethargic. I'm going to be emotionless. It might be just blah. I'm in the ditch. Okay. Either of those cases, you're not going to be optimized for doing life. I don't care what it is. You're not going to be in an optimal physiological or psychological state, right? And when you're able to do a lot of the things that we we introduce to you and offer to you at VUCA Fit, whether it's meditation, it is strength training, sleep, like all these things of living and stressors, like, intentional stressors. These are all designed to help you increase your window of tolerance. Why is that important? We've talked about it. It's an energy preservation scenario. It's like you're not going to waste energy on stuff that does not matter or that you cannot control. And that's where we find this little graphic here of this unicorn kind of floating in the water and super, super happy because it is in that optimal state, in that optimal band where things are going well, and therefore you're not wasting unnecessary energy. You can show up the best that you need to show up in life, and all these amazing, wonderful benefits that we get by being able to do that. Okay. So what ends up happening is you go through the world, and I've become more self-aware. I'm going to share something kind of interesting with you guys that happened through me. So I was getting ready to leave town, and I have been on a anti-anxiety medication for half of my life. And this anti-anxiety medication, I got put on in my mid-20s by, some psychiatrist, and it has habit-forming, addictive characteristics to it. And so it's very hard to get off. And I was getting ready to go out of town, and I wasn't able to coordinate a refill in time. So I basically went off of it cold turkey. Like I stopped 13, 14 days ago. And I was really worried about what would happen to my window of tolerance, particularly like anxiety. I'm like, okay, this thing helps me manage my anxiety for as long as I can remember. It's been part of my toolkit, right? And the reality is I've just become dependent upon it. And this was ripping off the Band-Aid, not on my own choice, to basically, I had to use the tools in my training that I carried with me to manage my window of tolerance. And there were a couple times that I felt my anxiety creeping up. Like I literally felt it creeping up. And it was a really cool real world scenario for me to kick in my training, because if you've never had a panic attack, they're not fun. And I hope you never have one. And if you've had one, you know what I'm talking about. They're the opposite of fun. They can sometimes feel like you're dying, or like a 500-pound person sitting on your chest. I mean, if you can't manage it and you get full into panic, it is this flight mode, and it's not a lot of fun. So I was hopping on a plane, I was going to be traveling and all these things. And even on the plane, I felt myself getting a little anxious. I'm like, okay, this is where I figured that this may happen, because, you're on a plane, you're with a bunch of people. It's just complexity. And I felt my anxiety starting to rise. And I was like, okay, here's the chance to apply my training, apply the tools in the VUCA Fit tool belt to my real world circumstances of managing rising anxiety that I don't have a medical tool to apply it to. So I had to figure it out. And it was pretty cool. I started to feel my anxiety rise. And that's a skill set that you learn and you train with. You learn to sense how your body is responding and pay attention to symptoms. And then I identified that something wasn't kind of heading the way I wanted to, because I felt this many, many times before, even when I was on this medication. And I'm like, okay, this is my opportunity to breathe through this and quiet my mind. I already had on my AirPods and noise canceling headphones. I went ahead and turned it to a pretty meditative song that I go to bed at a lot. It's a really just melodic song called Oceans. I really like it. And I put it on repeat. It's like an 8-minute song. I didn't even need to get through the first play of it. I started controlling my breathing. I tried to block out as much as what was happening around me. And I, for lack of better terms, I meditated and breathed through it. And it just slowed down my breathing. I was very conscious about it. I was very deliberate. And I didn't give this thing, anxiety rising up, the opportunity to take over. Instead, I decided to focus on my breathing, and I actually felt it subside. And I was waiting for it to come back. I was like, oh, well, that's cool. I put it at bay for a minute. It's going to come back. And it just didn't. That happened a couple other times. I'm fully prepared for it to happen at any point in time. But it happened a couple other times during this period where I was basically, my body was withdrawing and detoxing from this substance. And once I got done, I was done, and breathing helped me in closing my eyes and focusing, and just the problem went away. The anxiety went away. And it literally was like, wow, this is what it means to be a VUCA trained person who has a tool and your training kicks in. And I keep saying training because I'll bring an analogy together. I've got a buddy who's a jumbo jet pilot. And, I talked about flying earlier. I used to have flying anxiety. Now I don't. I don't have anxiety around flying. And a big part of that is because I have a lot of peers I have multiple peers that are pilots, but specifically one who talks about how they train and what they do and all these things. And, I'm like, what happens? Look, asking silly questions. I'll be like, hey, what happens when an engine goes out? And he's like, this is our training kicks in. Like, we have a checklist. We go through a process. We've got SOPs, standard operating procedures, boom, boom, boom. You go down the list. And I realized that the same thing happens with your window of tolerance. Is like, if the breathing wouldn't have worked for me and the meditation wouldn't have worked for me, I've got other tools that I could have tapped into in my toolbox that would have helped me. If I wouldn't have been on an airplane, I could have exercised. I could have gone for a walk. I could have, if I had a cold plunge, I guarantee if I would have hopped in a cold plunge, that would have probably changed the channel right away. There's a variety of different ways that you can change the channel. But the first thing you have to do is realize that you have something coming at you. And the second is that you get to apply your training. It's like, okay, what that I know how to do, can I do to change this outcome and kind of keep me in my window of tolerance? Because staying out of your window of tolerance while the high highs are kind of interesting, they're a little bit chaotic and they're hard to manage and it's not sustainable. And then the low lows, if you've ever dealt with being sad or depressed or whatever, this is a place that most people want to hang out either. So I'm a living testimony that, and sometimes Jose will share these things, and he's kind of he's the wise one whose teachings we're sharing and make it sound good. And sometimes I find it like it's helpful that you hear it from somebody who's actually like dealt with these things and who's in a fight, and I consider this couple of week period where I was coming off of this medication a fight. And as I look here today, I am on day 12, and each day gets easier, just like when I came off of withdrawal from nicotine, a couple years ago or whatever. And so I wanted to stop by and just drop a little bit of not only knowledge, but moreover personal testimony on things that, if you haven't been open to these concepts, or you think something like meditation or breathing or whatever is kind of, woo-woo type of stuff, or, hey, that's not for me. Guess what? I used to be that person. I used to say that. And do I always reach for my breathing or meditation when things aren't going great? Absolutely not. Like, that's not my default state. But when faced with something like a non-fun panic attack versus breathing or whatever, I'm going to take that. I'm going to take the breathing. I'm going to take the meditation. I'm going to apply it. I'm going to get through it. And I have to believe that even me navigating a couple of those scenarios is also training. Like, it's making me stronger. It's making it so that the next opportunity may not come up as strongly to, potentially put me into a panic state. And that, maybe one day I'll look up in a year or two and realize that not only did I not need that medication, but maybe I don't even need my training to manage anxiety, because I put myself in kind of an optimal state most of my waking hours. And that's really what VUCA Fit's all about, guys. It's about being in that optimal state and not letting yourself go into the ditch or go too high into the sky. So what do you do with this? How do you do this? How do you apply this training? I'm really glad that I asked that question on your behalf right now, because I'm going to point you over to our website, VUCAFit.com. And we actually have a bunch of free resources, including a breathing guide. So if you wanted to get the breathing treatments, like the protocols and whatnot, we've got, I think, 4 of them on there. And then also we've got Jose's Unbreakable guide, which introduces at a high level 5 different categories of things that you can do, different tools that you can put in your metaphorical tool belt to manage VUCA. And I'm living proof and testimony, and I'm excited that I, A, am not on that medication, and B, get to share that testimony with you so that you feel a little bit more powerful when you go through the day and feel a little bit more in control because, you've got resources and tools that are available. You just gotta pick them up and use them. And I'm here to tell you that it's worth it. So until next week, I am your host, Kevin Oldham. I have greatly enjoyed visiting with you on a solo episode. I found out I was doing a solo episode about 16 minutes ago, and this is a 15-minute episode. So I appreciate you. I hope you have a phenomenal week and be well.